I kind of wanted to, ostensibly we're going to chat about 2010 this evening,
Hmm.
but I sort of wanted to take this in a slightly different direction, because by this point you've had, what, 2006, 7, 8 and 9, so 4 years into the project, as it were.
Yep.
But nonetheless, it's kind of, it's still a different gig to having been the manager of the national road team, where you can kind of, you have the pick of all the riders that you want, to creating and developing and kind of like nurturing this thing that's more, I was going to say like a family in some ways, than a national
Mm.
squad that gets sort of plucked out of the ether every now and again. Um, so yeah, so how, if you're looking back to that time, kind of how would you say in retrospect things were going, and what had you learned by this point? You know, how was it different to being the GB manager, and so on and so forth?
Well, you had a budget to work to. I think that's the thing that's the biggest. Like you say, you didn't get the pick of the best riders. You had there was a purse there of an amount of money that you had to budget for the races that you wanted to go to, and then the types of riders that you could afford to bring in. The success of the Tour Series meant that riders' wages was going up, because the profiles of those riders here in the UK was going up. The scene was getting stronger, and market forces. It's obvious. I think when we talk a little bit further into this, you'll see that a number of teams are starting to emerge that had a lot of good riders in them as well. It wasn't just our team that had the good guys in it, but there were other teams as well that were recruiting very, very good riders. And I think our team in 2010, you could see that we started to bring in some Australians. Couple of reasons for that. One, obviously, was the Tour Series itself, because they all Aussies. I think we've said in previous recordings that the Aussies were always good when they came over here. Their criterium racing was very, very similar to ours, so you always knew they were going to fit in. I had a good scouts in Christian House and Tom Southern that had ridden over there in Australia, so they kind of knew the scene over there, knew the guys. So it was fairly risk-free bringing those guys in, and they were glad of the opportunity to race here in the UK. So, budgetary wise, I didn't have to pay those guys as much as some of the other British guys were asking for. And certainly for our sponsors, it was good as well. I mean, they like to have foreign riders in the team as well. So that was a positive thing. So the scene has started to change. It started to develop. It got stronger. And the Tour Series, I have to say, probably was the main reason for that. Tour of Britain as well, but I think the Tour Series as well. Most, the British team got that. It was their bag, if you like. And as a result, the scene got stronger.
Yeah, and I remember at the time, kind of, it's interesting to look now, because I think that the Tour of Britain's viewing figures, as the race has kind of gone on to increase in stature, have sort of increased exponentially. And perhaps the Tour Series, in the same way, its profile hasn't kind of expanded in the same way that Tour of Britain has, it for understandable reasons. But at that time, you could get the same amount of viewing figures through Tour Series as you could for Tour of Britain, but you could get a hell of a lot more screen time. It's kind of understandable that was driving wages at the time. Was that happening across the board, or was it just that specific kind of bike rider that was good at crits that were commanding the high wage, or did it just sort of generally affect wages full stop, on the basis that if you're going to be in a team, you're probably going to be riding the Tour Series anyway?
Yeah, I think sort of we were one of the bigger teams. Therefore, we had more riders, if you like. But I think I think that if the smaller team meant simply that the riders had to do both. It was as simple as that. And because Rapha and Condor still wanted us to do this international road program, it meant whilst the Tour Series was on, it usually meant, I think, what clashed with, I think it was the RAS in Ireland usually clashed with the Tour Series. So it meant you had to let 5 riders go over to the RAS. We didn't have to, but that's what we wanted to do. So we had 2 teams on the go at that was probably the busiest period of the year for us.
And at that time as well, I seem to recall, what's Bob Howden's race? up in Yorkshire.
Oh, Bob, we're really, really sorry about this. We've forgotten your name of your race. Oh, it's gone.
Yeah. Anyway, but there were Premier Calendar, as it was at that time still, there was Premier Calendar races across those weekends. Yeah. The Tour Series very quickly kind of elbowed those races out, really, because it was no longer possible for teams to, because you were on the road Tuesday, Thursday, to then think about going to a bike race on the Sunday in the UK, to then be at another bike race on the Tuesday. It became like, it had the potential to become like a 6-week stage race.
Without sort of beating our own drum too much, we managed our season very, very well, despite the fact that we had 2 programs going, or 1.5 programs going at any one time. And certainly during the Tour Series, we had the 2 programs going with two big goals, if you like. The international stage race in Ireland, the FBD RAS, as I think it was called then, and the Tour Series as well. But it also meant that those riders that came out of the RAS could then go and dominate the Premier Calendar Series afterwards as well. Whereas the top riders that had ridden the Tour Series could have a little bit of a rest. We eased them back a little bit. So that definitely affected our domestic results later on in the season. We weren't as fatigued, if you like, as the other teams. And that's where I think that's where we scored the most, managing those busy periods in the season that we got.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I guess that's reflected in the fact that Chris Newton won at Lincoln. And not only won Lincoln Grand Prix, but won Lincoln Grand Prix in a year where I think there were 3 riders from Team Sky, and I think one of those was Aaron Thomas, and I think Russ Downing. I can't remember who the. Yeah. You look at it.
Well, I mean, Newton was a world-class rider. I mean, don't forget he was a world champion on the track, and as a result of that, Chris's career could have taken a completely different path. I think if Chris was definitely one of those guys, if Team Sky had been around earlier, he would be he would have definitely been a rider that would have been on their radar, and perhaps his whole career would have taken a completely different path. Who knows?
2 things that I guess internationally stood out for 2 different reasons for me. One was Japan, because I snuck away in the baggage and came along with you for that one, so I got a lot of.
That's right, you did. Yeah, I forgot that. Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Strong memories of.
Fond memories of that.
Yeah. But also, I guess as an example of the kind of races that the team was going to do, that were possibly in some ways driven by sponsors. I think Sharp, obviously.
Sharp, and Rapha very much so. And I think the thing to say was that we were one of the few teams that were bringing in sponsors from outside of the sport as well. I know you worked a lot with Sharp the previous year, actually, when we only had them as like a sub-sponsor for the Tour of Britain, because although the team looks as though it was actually called Rapha Condor Sharp in 2009, it actually only changed for the Tour of Britain. For Sharp's involvement meant we had to become a little bit more professional, do a little bit more for the sponsors, and obviously Sharp's connections. Whilst the money came from Sharp here in the UK, it still meant it was still good for us to go to Japan, which was where they were based, basically. Obviously the main company was, but it was probably Rapha that drove that more than anything else out in Japan. And you were there and you witnessed it. The sort of following the team got was quite. Yeah, it's a little bit weird. I think we mentioned it in a previous episode of this. When we went to Korea, but it's a similar thing. People making caricatures of the riders, like things like that. One Dean Downing had some fan over there who liked him so much, he bought him these really, really expensive jeans, like a £200 pair of jeans, and just gave him a pair of these Japanese salvage denim jeans that. I'm not sure if Dean it was quite crafty, Dean. I think he might have put some sort of message out there that he liked this brand, and a fan actually came up to him and gave him a pair of these jeans. So it's quite funny. Yeah. But I mean, we went to in Japan, we obviously went to the what's name school, the Keirin School. One of the stages was held at the Keirin School there. For those people that don't know, the Keirin School, it's not just about the tracks. They have this massive road circuit as well there, and big enough to big enough to hold a stage of the race on it, and it's a tough circuit.
Had a good climb, didn't it, as I recall?
Hmm?
And it had a good
Christian,
climb. And,
yeah, very, very, yeah. If you add up the sort of the climbing that you do over the course of the stage, it's quite a tough day. Well, really, really tough day. And I remember Christian winning there. Christian won in the national champions jersey, which for Rapha was like, it was a massive thing. I mean, it was a big thing for everybody, but in particular for them and their fans, it was a fantastic day for us.
Yeah, no, I think I remember Lappers was away with him for quite a lot of that.
Yeah,
All of that stuff.
yeah.
I can't remember if there was a third rider from another team that they dispatched at some point, but no, it was a good day.
No, it was good, very, very good. Yeah, I think your introduction into the team as well, sort of, it was that was like synonymous with us having to become more professional as well in the way we did things as well. That we needed that extra, make sure that we capitalised on our. Not just the results, but the stuff that we were doing as well, because it wasn't all about asking you to write how well we did in this race or whatever. There was other stuff that we had to do behind the scenes as well to satisfy sponsors as well. So that was it. And I also think some of the good results came from that. I've only twice in all my years of doing this have managed to sign a contract with a sponsor for more than 1 year. A lot of people don't know that in continental teams basically go from 1 year to the next. You don't know when you get to end of August, early September. You don't know if you've got a sponsor for the following year or not. And when we signed with Sharp in 2010, we signed for 2 years. It was that was a big deal, to be honest, in terms of not in the amount of money, but the fact that it was for 2 years. Because with the 2 years, it meant that us as a team and in Rapha and Condor, the other sponsors, we could actually have a plan basically. And I think the results that we got reflect that stability that the 2 year contract gave us.
Yeah, I guess there'd be a lesson.
It is a lesson for sure, and it's a lesson that we, hopefully, if these series carries on, it happened with JLT as well. I remember going into a big meeting with them, and I think that's probably for another episode.
So yeah, just coming back to Tour of Japan, I guess the other things that stuck out for me, and I'm not just as much a reflection as a question, was just it was the first time that I was kind of aware of Rapha, obviously, and what's happening in the UK, but equally the cycling scene in the UK relative to our cousins in Europe was still and is still to a large extent domestically on the road a fairly embryonic kind of thing that happens, mostly below even the UCI calendar. And then we go to this thing in Japan, and there's people wearing our jersey.
Yeah.
There's that kind of, you see the first one and you go, oh, that's interesting. Some fella's got our jersey out here. and then all of the mates come as well. And it was just like, oh my goodness. And I've got a photo somewhere of, I remember that there was a stage that started in a kind of, and again, this was, I guess, going off at a slight tangent, one of the interesting things culturally about going to Japan for me was the way that the bike race was done there. So we would mainly race on circuit. So it was, people think Tour of Japan, you've been going like from, here to here, but you would do the stage, and then we would give them the team car back, and a Japanese team would drive the car, and we all got on a coach together with the Australian team and to go.
And woe betide if you were late. The Japanese were a stickler at timing.
But then, the one day that sort of sticks in my head, and I don't know if these were both the same day, but there was the day where we started in that kind of, I guess, more rural, authentic Japanese village, and just the kind of slight chaos of that. And I've got a photo where people were just kind of crowding around the team, and taking lots of photos. So I got my camera out and started taking photos of the people taking photos.
People take photos, yeah.
Kind of, bit crazy. But the strangest one being the day we started at that Buddhist temple.
Yeah, I thought you were going to mention this. Yeah.
And we got to the temple, and we unload, and we all get sorted and set up, and there's some photos. And like I say, somewhere I've got a photo of Darren Lapthorne with Bambi lying purring at his feet, which I might try and dig out and find. And then the guys get onto the bikes, they ride a quarter of a mile, and then everybody stops, and then they put the bikes all into the back of vans. Everybody gets back on coaches, and we must have driven for like half an hour to the circuit, but we couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
It's just a different style of racing. Yeah. It was. I think for certainly some of the pro continental teams that did it, and then I think in other editions of the Tour of Champion we've had World Tour teams go into it as well. It took a few years for those teams to get their heads around that and cope with that. I mean, for a continental team, for us it was just, we were just glad that we were invited and we were there, so to speak. It was a race, and our sponsors wanted to do it, so we were just happy to be there and quite happy to go with the flow of things. But it is culturally, again, for the riders, it was really, really good to see how other cultures are, basically. And as I've just mentioned, the Japanese were a stickler for, you had to be on time, and you had to do things a certain way. And when you see groups of tourists, Japanese tourists here in the UK, you see the lady with the umbrella in her hand or whatever she uses, and you can see them just diligently following them around. You can see where it comes from. I was fortunate to go to the Tour of Japan in the last year of the team as well, and we had people that were helping us. That were, they were getting up at 5:30 in the morning to tell us where the breakfast room was in the hotel where we just had the evening meal the night before. We knew exactly where it was, and couldn't understand why these people were getting up so early to tell us where the breakfast room was, but it was on their piece of paper. That was what they had to do that day, and that's what they were going to do. And the same thing, you get back to the next hotel the next evening, and they would be stood outside the lift for the 4-hour period that the evening meal ran for, and they were there literally pointing you as you came out of the lift 10 meters to where the room was. It was like, lady, why are you here? You don't need to be here. Yes, we do. We have to be here. We've been told to be here, so we'll be here. And culturally, it was interesting to see how they work. So I think for our team in particular, I like that side of it, to be able for riders to be exposed to that. And
I remember on the flip side of the of the super helpful thing as well, though, that sort of sticklers for rules, like you say, timing was one thing, but also, I don't know if you recall, we had a photographer along for the ride with us.
I think of his name.
Well, it was Daisuke, the Japanese.
Daisuke was Daisuke was the Japanese distributor for Rapha over there. And probably the coolest guy I've ever met. Yeah, and he was a friend of his. And
Shu, I think.
I remember his name. I can't remember his name.
I'm sure it was Shu.
Shu, that was it. It was Shu. And and we sneaked him in, didn't we, for the whole week, basically.
He kept on my floor, and I think it was about on the third day, the very pleasant, very polite, very lovely lady from the press office came along. That it had been brought to her attention that somebody had said that there was a possibility that maybe.
No, can't be.
Not
he
me.
Wasn't with her. Yeah. She basically deteriorated as the week went on, from despite that sort of like the Japanese culture for sleeping on futons. It still was pretty uncomfortable to sleep on a floor.
Yeah.
But he was a good photographer, I have to say. He took a lot of good shots. Shu, that's his name. Yeah, I remember now.
Talking a little bit about the riders, and like I said, I say this unashamedly because I was involved in the team that year, but it felt like a really kind of special, quite interesting group of people that had been brought together that year in the team. And Graham would be one of those people that was kind of an important part of that mix.
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, that was a good group. I mean, they've all got their, you know, they've all got their pluses and minuses, riders over the years. But certainly, it would be very difficult not to like having Brigger in your team. To be honest, we're talking about a rider called Graham Briggs, for those that don't know. And Graham Briggs has been has been part of the British team for many years. Not a lot of people know, but he won a race in France when he was very young. His career could quite easily have taken a different path, but he came back to the UK to race, and he's raced for various teams. He's probably raced for the teams that I've managed the most. That's the team that he's been with the most. But in the years that I've not had a big enough budget, I've had a good enough relationship with him to say, look, I can't pay you what you deserve to be paid. If you can get paid, if someone offers you more money elsewhere, go. There's absolutely no hard feelings whatsoever. And a couple of times he's left the team and gone because he could get paid his more money or his market value, whatever you think that is. In my team, I would not overpay if the budget didn't. I wouldn't compromise the race program and the backup of riders to pay one rider, significantly more. And everyone knew that. So, Christian left a similar situation as well. Not quite the same, but similar financially, and also wanted to sort of try out racing in the States as well, racing for an American team. But I've always had good relationships with riders as well, on that basis, that I don't have a problem with riders that lead at all, never. And a lot of them are told, well, all of them are told, just be honest. If you get another offer, fine, just tell me you've had another offer. That's all I ask. Just do me the courtesy. If you said I've had another offer, fine, okay. Do you want to go? Or it's not a problem at all. It was too, for me, the sport generally is too small, but in the UK it's even smaller. So there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to fall out with a rider because he wants to, move because he's been offered money elsewhere. We had a program of racing that our sponsors wanted us to do, and that was the most important thing, really. And then if the budget wouldn't allow us to be able to pay the riders what the going rate was that year, then we had to find riders that we could cheaper to, the next group coming through, if you like. And that's what we always tried to do.
You've had a reputation during through the Rapha Condor and the JLT Condor years of assembling great teams, but the team always won. The team always functioned well. The team always, I think, in all honesty, delivered for its sponsors. And I suppose one of the things was to ask you, what's the magic, and is there a methodology for doing it, or is it something that comes from guts? Like, how do you?
I think towards the end it's guts, but initially it was. I was very clear in when I spoke to sponsors, making sure I knew exactly what they wanted from the team. Being honest with the sponsor, being clear what their goals were, and if they said a certain set of goals that were unachievable, tell them that. The obvious one is it's sport, mate. There are no guarantees in sport, so I can tell you I put the best team ever together, but it still doesn't mean we're going to win the race. So that was the other one, and then actually, getting the balance of riders right as well was kind of key.
This is the one I'm trying to gently nudge you towards, because there's an anecdote, and whether it is an anecdote or an actual management technique that relates to breeds of dogs that I'm sure you've
well, I can't.
Without allocating riders to breeds.
This is kind of this is not mine. This is from Steve Peters, the psychologist at Ineos use and Team Sky, and then before that, British Cycling. Is his way of explaining it to coaches and to managers. And it's a very, very simple way of looking at a group of people, if you like, and he likens them to dogs, basically. And you have to take it as read that you've taught the dog what is right and wrong. So it's house trained, basically. You fed it, you've watered it, basically. You let it do its constitutional and all those things. Take that as read for all 4 breeds. But there basically are 4 types of athlete. You've got Rottweilers, Alsatians, Labradors, and Poodles. And the theory is that if you've got a Rottweiler, you've signed a Rottweiler, what does a Rottweiler do? Well, a Rottweiler will replicate whatever it can do in training in a race situation. But every now and again, it's going to do something really, really special. Something it's capable of doing, something that you've never seen it do in training, basically. So you've taught it, if you like, a Rottweiler to chase a robber or whatever, and it's never jumped over that 4-foot fence to get to the robber in its training, but in a real exercise, it's not only managed to go over it, it's sunk its teeth into the robber's neck, and you didn't want that to happen. However, that's your fault. You signed the Rottweiler. Don't complain when the Rottweiler does something that you don't want it to do. And probably an easier way of explaining that is probably in footballing terms. It's like a player like Wayne Rooney would be a classic example of who's really, really good. But every now and again, he's going to do something you don't want him to do. He's going to foul somebody. He's going to mouth off to a referee. Something's going to happen that's going to, cause you a problem. Don't complain when that rider does that, or that player in his case. Have a strategy in place for you to deal with it when he does, because it's going to happen. You sign the Rottweiler, basically, and they will cause you problems, but they're also the ones that will get you that really, really special win, special victory, score a special goal in Wayne's case, sort of thing. So that's the first of the types of riders. People can even people can even start thinking about this in the workplace, to be honest. The next one is the Alsatian. Alsatian is probably the easiest rider to coach. Whatever he does in training, he replicates his races. You give him his training, he does it. Doesn't cause you any problems, never phones you up. You have to phone him. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. That's it. Shortest conversations. You got a team of Alsatians, mate, your life's as easy as anything, whatever it could do. And as long as it's a good Alsatian, it's got good results and so on, you've signed that type of guy, you've got no problem with that type of rider whatsoever. The next one, going back to the Alsatian, they're great, but they're pretty, they're not very affectionate. Alsatians, they're just there. They're good, they're just, but they don't require you to stroke them or anything like that. The third type of athlete is your Labrador. Now, Labradors are really, really good for teams because they want everyone to get on. They want everyone to be really, really happy and are desperate to everybody, for everybody to have a nice time. If there's any animosity going on, or they don't want that, they don't like it, basically, and they will try everything in their power to make sure that doesn't happen. Labradors are also good for teams as well. You've probably seen a Labrador. They'll run and run and run and run and run and run and run, and then suddenly they'll just collapse. So they'll give everything to its master, or in our case, to its team, and they will turn themselves inside out to do it. However, that Labrador is constantly at your side. You have to keep stroking it. You have to keep telling it how good it is, basically. And that can be tough. If that phone call comes at 10 o'clock at night from that Labrador, you don't pick the phone up and say, what the hell do you want at this time of night? Your answer to that Labrador is, how you doing? What's up? What can we do for you? And it's all about managing those types of riders, if you like. There's no Labradors. You want those in the team, but you got to be careful. If you have too many of them, there's not enough hours in the day to keep stroking them. You can't satisfy them all, and as a result, then they'll go off and sign somewhere else because they're not. They don't feel they're being stroked enough, basically, and kind of that's where you end it. And then 9 times out of 10, somebody comes back and says, "Well, what about the poodle?" if you work out you've got a poodle, basically it just runs around the room and chases its own backside. You get rid of it as quickly as possible. And that's actually not quite true. I believe I've been subsequently told that actually poodles are quite trainable, but for the purpose of this, it's the idea of the poodle is that it's like if you work out and you've got a poodle early on, get rid of it as quickly as you can, basically. So you can now go back through all those teams, work out who your Rottweilers were, who your Alsatians were, who your Labradors. And I would say there was a few crossbreeds in there. Obviously, the 4 characters were like that was the main compartments, if you like, and you get a little bit of you'll get a little bit of crossbreeding, a couple of those dogs, sort of things. So yeah, and I don't think it wasn't necessarily thinking about, well, can I sign another Rottweiler? It's when you've worked out, if you've got a guy coming from Australia, for example, you won't necessarily know if he's a Rottweiler or an Alsatian or a Labrador. Hopefully you've not picked the poodle, but when you get him, you've agreed to sign him. I think it's all about you as a manager saying, okay, oh my God, if you get to the end of the training camp in January, find out you've got 10 Labradors, you know you're in for a long season, sort of thing, you know? Doesn't mean you're going to be less successful, but it means you're going to have to do a lot of stroking.
Got it. Without prejudice, coming back to that, the class of 2010, who are we kind of had a conversation before this about riders that kind of, I suppose, were the archetypes, the epitome of a particular thing, but who are the standout riders of that year for you? And not necessarily just before 2010, but I don't know, where do the fondest memories lie? Maybe a good starting point. Who stands out from that cohort of people as the one that left the biggest impression upon you? Maybe not as a bike rider necessarily, but as a person.
From that particular team?
Yeah.
Go run through that team. Have you got it there in front of you?
Yeah. Briggs, Craven, Cronshaw, Dempster, Downing, Greenwood, House, Lapthorne, Newton, Southam, Tin and Lock, Windsor.
So in terms of the standout people there, it would have been Christian winning in Japan in the national champs jersey. That was a standout occasion. Brigger, out and out Labrador, constantly needed to be stroked and was always a joy. He was so desperate for the team to be successful. But, you know, for pretty much all the time was so upbeat. Sometimes it was like it was too much. You know, he was he was always smiling, and people that know him will say the same thing. Tom Southam was he was also good. He's probably one of the most difficult riders to categorize, actually. He kind of was a sneaky Rottweiler, basically, because he was definitely causing problems behind the scenes, getting up to mischief, sort of thing. But he kind of always he always delivered, sort of thing. I mean, we're going off a slight tangent here. I'm currently watching the Last Dance on Netflix at the moment, which is it's about the Chicago Bulls basketball team, and one of their players is a player called Dennis Rodman, sort of thing. And it's interesting to see how that team dealt with his characters, because he was definitely he was off the wall, basically. He was a big character. Yeah, he's been in North Korea and all sorts of things. But I kind of I love watching other sports like that and seeing how they deal. And it's the same. They have the same problems, you know, with. And this, you know, in this last series, you know, Des Rodman had to go on a 2-day bender, but he asked the coach, "I need a vacation," basically. And I'd get the similar sort of thing from Tom Southam. You'd know he'd be up to no good, but when he came back, he would be better for it. He'd be better for it, and he'd actually give more to the team as a result of that. So Tom was one. I think all the Aussies that came. Bought into it straight away. They were really good. I don't think I've ever had any problems with any of the Aussies that came over with our team. Darren Lapthorne was probably one of the nicest riders to ever work with. What a nice guy. Well, I think we've mentioned that in last week's call them episodes now, aren't we? Look at us. And Dan Craven was starting to become a bit of a character. When he first joined, he was quite reserved. He started to grow a beard, which I absolutely detested. I hated it. Didn't like it at all. But Rapha wanted it. Rapha really kind of encouraged it. And that put me at odds with our sponsor a little bit, you know, which, I had
This might probably encourage people to go and take a look at Dan's, if you go to Pro Cycling Stats and look at the individual rider thumbnail. Yeah. Dan's is an exemplar of man with beard.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, and anyway, and the sport's changed. You know, you wouldn't have seen it at World Tour back then, but now you'll see. You know, you do see beards in World Tour. So, you know, the sport has changed. For sure. And Rapha were at the forefront of that change, in fairness. So, and it was an honour to work with such a forward-thinking sponsor who had a vision for how they thought cycling should be. And I've said it a number of occasions. They were visionaries, and and continue to be so, sort of thing. But going back to the riders, that team was quite easy to manage, really. We sat down at the start of the season at training camps, and we mapped out what riders would be doing what, on the understanding that they would, had to be flexible. If somebody became ill, then they'd have to fill in for somebody. And we've already said a classic example was, Tom crashing, and as a result, Graham Briggs had to last minute, come to the Tour of Japan with us. So it's all about giving riders clear goals and then doing your best to stick to them. And if you've got to change them, being open and honest with the rider as to why you're changing. A rider won't always like, being told that his program has changed or he's been dropped from a race or whatever. They shouldn't like it, in fairness, but that what they will do eventually, once that hurt is sort of mellowed a little bit, they will appreciate the honesty of it all, that you actually picked the phone up to them or did it face to face, which is even better, rather than just send them a text message or an email to say that we've changed the team, which I've, over the years, I've heard that's the way not just domestic teams here in the UK do, but also some World Tour teams as well, which was, when I heard that the first time, I was pretty staggered that there would be managers not returning phone calls and so on, which I thought is a pretty a bit off. It's not nice having to do that sort of thing, but I believe that's part of management, and you should do it.
Yeah. But then, of course, sometimes, and it's, I guess, interesting that we say this at a time, in the time in which we're recording this, obviously with the background of COVID-19 and what have you, that sometimes circumstance intervenes and stops a team. I recall when we sat down and I probably begged you to go on one of the international trips as part of my work for the team in 2010. I had a choice between going to Japan, which obviously I opted to do with you in the end, and the other one was BATTENKIll.
Wow.
I went to do BATTENKIll, and then something happened.
Yeah. BATTENKIll was probably the best race that we've ever been to. Yeah. And we could potentially do a whole episode on that. So if we do this might be the end of the program here, because this could take some time, this one. But